had a really great instructor at my school who every year tried to get me interested in the robotics team. And this year he says, I have a student who's creating an all-girls team. And that really sparked my interest.
Once we got the word out there were a lot of girls that came out of the woodwork and were like, hey, we want to be on robotics.
Being an all-girls team is really, empowering. It does teach you a lot, and it makes you feel really good. And there really is that push to get more in the STEM fields.
As they're building these robots, they're really gaining their STEM skills. Science, technology, engineering, and math, skills that are going to last them well throughout their lifetime.
Mechanical engineering is just one of those things that, it's hands-on, and I'm a very hands-on person.
You get to see all the knowledge that you've gained either online or in the classroom be put into use in real life. So in the classroom, you might be learning about mechanics within physics, but in robotics, you get to actually apply that knowledge and you actually get to see it work for something, which I think is really cool.
A lot of what I've learned is problem solving and working through things that come at you that kind of frustrate you. Like we'll have our claw not closing properly on our robot, or something will always go wrong before a match, but it's that perseverance to keep fixing it and keep going that makes the whole experience so great.
It's a really good mix between energy that comes from competition and cooperation, because a lot of the games here, they require immense teamwork, a lot of communication between teams that you've just met. It's a really great experience.
We're gonna grab one of the cubes, and you guys are gonna grab the other?
I think the best thing about our team is none of us had any experience at the beginning of the year, and so just being able to bounce ideas off of each other, we're all there to support each other.
And just having those STEM opportunities and bringing that moment to life for someone can continue them on that pathway and encourage them in a future career field.
28-15, Blue wins.
So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first morning session for the second day of the conference. Great. I think we've got a great panel coming up that I think you'll be very, very interested in. But first, I would like to introduce my division director. As Dave Campbell said, he introduced her last night, and I would be introducing his division director tomorrow morning. But this morning, I get to reintroduce Robin Wright, my division director from the Division of Undergraduate Education at the National Science Foundation, and she will give a few welcoming remarks this morning. So, Robin.
I've never been anywhere where there's music when you come in. I wish that happened when I went in my office every time I come in and out. Really inspirational. It is such a deep honor to serve at the NSF. My colleagues know that every day I walk in, I look at the symbol up there, and I walk in and I think, wow, I'm so lucky. The work that I do every day makes a difference in people's lives. And there are many ways that you can serve. You can serve in NSF. If you've reviewed any proposals for NSF, would you stand up? If you've been a reviewer of proposals? Okay. Now, no, stay standing up. I've got some work for you to do. Okay, a little bit work. So one of the great things about reviewing proposals, of course, is you become a better proposal writer as well. But I want you to look for people that are sitting down, and I'm going to ask you to spend just maybe 2 minutes and let people know around you what it was like. What did you learn? What was the most important thing you learned? So really, talk to each other for, I'm going to count this, for 1 minute. Okay. I love this part. This is kind of like active learning. You have to figure out. Thank you so much. Now, I know I didn't give you enough time to finish your conversation, and that was kind of on purpose. So I'm going to deputize each of you who's been a reviewer to share your experience. And for those of you who are interested, to come by the NSF booth, which is booth number 1, and find out more information about how to submit. It's an application we want in your CV. Now, the panels, I didn't know this actually until recently. The panels are very carefully constructed with expertise that matches what the proposal is planning to do. And it's all kind of expertise. We could use industry expertise, we can use education expertise, lots of expertise. So each panel is carefully constructed for that. And then the reviews are used by the program officers to make the best possible recommendations they can. Now, unfortunately, we don't have enough money to fund everything that we would like to fund. We mostly have to say no. And so those decisions are really critical. And the program officer makes those decisions. The program officer, which is also called, I'm learning, it's also called the program manager and also called the program director. They're all synonyms. They integrate all the information they have to try to build and maintain the best portfolio of research that we can. And so if you're interested, maybe this year isn't the right year for you, but maybe next year will be, or the next year, stop by the NSF booth and talk with some of the amazing program officers. Now, last night, I'm going to read this quote. We had a wonderful talk, and I wrote this down, and it was about how to be a good leader. And it said, surround yourself with good people, and then motivate them. And the program directors and officers are amazing, wonderful people. I will tell you that the National Science Foundation is the best place I've ever worked in terms of my colleagues, in terms of feeling like you have a joint goal. It's just wonderful. So if you're interested in someday being a program officer, start thinking about it now, and we'll do that. Now, one of the wonderful people that I surround myself with is, of course, Celeste, who is, like I said, she's a force of nature. She earned her PhD from Penn State University and then did postdoctoral work at Berkeley. She's a microbiologist, does work on viruses. And then she went to Foothill College and was there for 15 years. During that time, she rotated twice, and then she came to NSF permanently. So she's been with NSF since 2009 and is the lead for ATE. She is your best advocate, I will tell you. She is fearless about telling us your good stories, passing those on. So be sure you let her know when something great happens, and she will pass it on, and sometimes it goes all the way up to the 19th floor, which is the director's place, and gets a lot of publicity. So Celeste is going to chair the panel today, and so I'll invite her to come back up. Thanks.
Okay, so we're all just going to come up. See if my mic's on. Yes, my mic is on. So we're all going to, all of us are going to come up and take a seat in front of you. And I was saying that I haven't done a panel this way before, but for those of you who've been here at the ATE conference in prior years, you know that the host of Biotech Nation, Moira Gunn, often comes and facilitates panels for us. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to do my best to channel Moira this morning. So, and see how we do, see how I do, because I know the panelists are going to have some really important things to tell you. So I'm going to just briefly introduce each panelist, and we have three very different perspectives around the workforce that we support with all of the programs within ATE. It's, for a while, was called middle skills, right? It's been called blue-collar STEM. And in a recent National Academy study, they decided that what they wanted to frame this around was the skilled technical workforce. So if you haven't seen that report yet, it was published, it came out in May, and it's actually called Building America's Skilled Technical Workforce. You can download the PDF on the National Academy's Press, so that's nap.edu. Okay, so this morning we have a president of a community college. This is Asnuntuck and
Correct.
Tunxus Community College. You're actually the president of two community colleges in the Connecticut system right now.
Correct.
Graduate of Holyoke Community College.
Yes.
You've worked in industry. First in your family to graduate from college.
First generation college, yes.
Yeah. So you have one perspective for us. Next we have Dr. Vic McCrary, who is one of the newer members of the National Science Board. So if you remember looking at the chart of how the National Science Foundation is organized, the director of the National Science Board of the National Science Foundation reports to the National Science Board. So they are an advisory and governing board of the National Science Foundation. And Vic has his own very unique perspective. Then we have Dr. Nicole Smith, who is from the Georgetown University, the Center on Education and the Workforce. So she's looking at this from the standpoint of a researcher. So what I'm going to do is let each of you give your remarks initially, and then we will open up. We have a few questions to get started, but I'm guessing that all of you out there might also have questions that you would like to pose to the panelists. So I'm going to let you start.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I want to start with saying good morning, everyone. I want to start by thanking AACC and the NSF for the invitation to participate in today's discussion. One of the things this morning was a student breakfast and watching the students receive the awards. To me, as a president of a community college, that's what it's all about, is the students this morning. I'm going to take just a few minutes and talk about our regional Center for Next Generation Manufacturing. And our regional center in Connecticut is one of 7 NSF ATE manufacturing centers in the United States. Our regional center was established in 2004 and is currently in its 3rd round of funding. And our center is led by Connecticut College of Technology, which is actually a consortium of 12 Connecticut community colleges and 8 public and private universities that really bring together educators and industry partners. The College of Technology was legislatively created in 1995 to establish really seamless pathways in engineering and technology in Connecticut with multiple entry and exit points. And as I put together some of the data for this presentation, it amazed me to look at where we were and where we've come since 2004, and I want to share 3 statistics. In Connecticut, our overall Connecticut community colleges, the College of Technology, so these are specific associate degrees and certificates around STEM fields. Back in 2004, we had 600 that we awarded, and this fall we were at 2,205, so literally a 269% increase through our center. Underrepresented minorities in all STEM fields, we were about 650 back in 2004, and we're at 2,480, so a 272% increase in the AS degrees awarded to underrepresented minorities. And female students, our center has focused on female students in manufacturing and STEM fields. Back in 2004, we were at 540. This year, 2017, we had a 46% increase, 789. And really the regional centers focused on the underrepresented populations, professional development for instructors, curriculum and pathway development, and creating those collaborations all throughout New England. Since 2012, our state of Connecticut invested multi-million dollars creating 7 advanced manufacturing technology centers across our state. As Dunsite Community College being the first one, we've been doing it now for about 18 years in Enfield, Connecticut. And this spring we added 9 new advanced manufacturing certificates, which was very exciting for me to bring these to fruition. Quality inspection, additive manufacturing, CAD and CAM, advanced CNC programming, and so forth. Connecticut really has been focusing on developing a skilled workforce. Our regional center for next generation, some of our strategies I want to share just quickly, really delivering externships to faculty. So far 141 faculty have worked 4-week-long industry assignments with curriculum integration. We've had 12 high school counselor workshops where we've had over 350 counselors attend these. Our center also holds each summer summer teacher workshops, and to date we've had 200 educators that have participated in these different types of workshops. Our center also conducts annual surveys to assess manufacturing workforce needs in Connecticut, and so far our center has held 15 annual manufacturing. These are Your Future Expos, we call them, and over 10,000 high school students have attended these expos, really trying to change the perception of advanced manufacturing technologies. We also held a mini maker fair. Actually 2 weeks ago at Tunx's campus, we had almost 4,000 people show up for a mini maker fair and really watch the community, the hands-on, the youngsters, and even the parents. It really is starting to change that perception of what advanced technologies is all about. One of the things our center has really focused on is creating materials that really relate to people, and videos and handouts and brochures. Our Manufacturing Your Future publication and our Manufacturing Your Future 2.0, over 13,000 publications were distributed nationwide. We also created a You Belong Women's in Manufacturing, where over 3,000 publications were distributed nationwide. And our newest work, which I'm very proud of, is the new video series targeting veterans, which was just released in this October. And I want to share, actually, this is one of my students from Ms. Nuntuck who now works for Pratt & Whitney. And if I can cue up the video, it's 2 minutes long and it's something I'm passionate about and I want to share. And again, the students, this is what it's all about.
I was in the Navy for 4 years as an airframes technician, so I worked on flight control surfaces of F-18s. I decided on a career in manufacturing because I didn't have enough experience coming out of the Navy to get a job in aviation maintenance. I went to Nuntuck Community College in Enfield, and when I got there, I was amazed at how much stuff they had. Like, they teach you how to make things with your hands, and you get dirty, and it's awesome. And there's a lot of experience there, too. All their instructors have a lot of experience, and they work really well together. So overall, the whole thing was awesome. I think the best parts of the program was the support, the amount of time that they put into everybody. It made you really want to work really hard, and it made you know that you could do it. I'm a production technician at Pratt & Whitney in East Hartford. Without having gone to Nuntuck, I never would have been able to network well enough to get a job there. My employment started a few months before I graduated. They worked really hard with me to make sure that I could finish everything. Pretty grateful for that. What I like most about manufacturing is this thing that you're creating is gonna go and it's gonna take people around the world. And it's exciting to know that you're gonna make something that's that important.
And just to end real quickly, a couple more points. You could see it in the video. I'm so proud of our new Manufacturing Technology Center. 27,000 square feet, a $25 million project. We now have 50,000 square feet combined at Nuntuck Community College for advanced manufacturing technology. And some of the things that we do that I feel are very unique is, as a president, we have to look, and I have to look at the next generation coming forth. So we have what we call a fifth-year program, and our fifth-year model starts in the 6th grade. I deploy instructors every day to 5 different school systems, touching 3,000 youngsters. And each day, these individuals are exposed to everything from CNC machining. We put tabletop CNC machines in there, 3D printers, virtual welders, the CAD and CAM software for the students. So starting in the 6th grade to the 10th grade, they're being exposed to about 700 hours. In the 10th grade, they can decide to go into what we call the 5th-year program. And between 10th grade and senior year, they can earn up to 30 college credits, both academic and technical credits. They're graduating with half an associate's degree. They come to Nuntuck for 1 additional calendar year, spring, summer, and fall, and they walk out with their associate's degree in advanced technologies. The other thing we do is we bust in, starting this year, 250 high schoolers. We bust in the afternoons to hit our production floor, to have the hands-on, that experiential learning. And to me, it's that investment. If we don't educate the youngsters, and also from 6th grade to 10th grade, these individuals are bringing home the projects. So mom and dad are seeing what's involved, what they're doing with hands-on. So by the time they come to 10th grade, they're making that educated guess, or the education decision to jump into manufacturing, see that there really are careers there. It's not just jobs, it's careers. 98% job placement rate coming out of Nuntuck Community College. $50,000, $60,000 a year to start. Full medical, dental benefit packages for our students. And the employers are continuing to pay tuition reimbursement for them to finish the degree and go on for the 4-year university. So stackable credentials really is what we're focusing on. So thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. That's great. All right, Dr. McCrary.
Yes, thank you, Celeste. I want to first thank again the organizers, National Science Foundation, AACE, Dr. Carter, Dr. House, and the rest of the folks here for coming out and talking about this really important subject. I want to start off actually with my view of skilled technical workforce with a personal story. And this starts in 2012. I live in the Washington area, and for those who live in the area at that time, during the summer, we experienced what they call a mini hurricane called a derecho. So, and a lot of people who lived particularly in the suburbs, we lost power for about 4 or 5 days. So my daughter and her friends come over, they want to watch TV, power's restored, they can't turn on the TV. So I said, just hit the reset button. Nope, reset button wouldn't work, Dad. And so my wife looks at me and she says, you know, it's 3 weeks before the Olympics start, we have to go out and buy a big screen TV. And I said, look, and please follow this story, because either it's the story of someone who's clairvoyant or an old curmudgeon. And so I said, no, I'm not going to spend the money on a new TV. We can fix this TV. And so my wife said, well, I'll give you 3 weeks to fix it. So I thank God for the internet. I looked up and it found out that the capacitors for this brand of TV, which was not made in America, is temperature rated and limited. And this is what happens when you have a sudden power surge. So I said, well, good. All I have to do is replace the capacitors. This is something I learned in high school. So I went out to Radio Shack. Of course, Radio Shack no longer sells capacitors, okay? So I had to go order these capacitors online. Thank God for the internet. And so about 11 o'clock at night, I'm removing a board, I'm desoldering these parts. My wife is holding the board for me. She's saying, don't burn me now. And my son comes down, who at that time was about 16 years old, and says, Dad, who does this stuff anymore? Okay? The reason I point that out, oh, and by the way, I put new capacitors in, the TV worked, we were able to watch the Olympics, and I saved my $2,500 on buying the board. So, you know, as I told my son, age and treachery always beats youth and skill, okay? The reason this is very important is when I came to the National Science Board in November of last year to the appointment of President Barack Obama, we were looking at new programs of how can we really have the relevance of the National Science Foundation, you know, which has been in many programs, funds basic and applied university research for many, many years, and has really been the impetus for a lot of the products, processes, and knowledge that we have actually benefited from across the spectrum. One of the things we looked at is, however, how can we look at, which initially we called blue-collar STEM, which is now morphed into skilled technical workforce, looking at those 14 to 23 million folks who do not have a bachelor's degree, but who have STEM skills that are very important to this economy. If you look at Jonathan Rothwell's report that came out about 4 or 5 years ago, looking at the blue-collar hidden STEM economy, if you read that, one of the things you'll see is this, that for example, for every PhD that we have in the economy, there's anywhere between 7 to 20 workers who support them, either at a bachelor's or non-bachelor's level. If you look at where the economy has gone, so if you see, for example, in oil extraction, mineral extraction, healthcare, large numbers of workers in this area without a bachelor's degree. The demographics of these workers tend to be about 40% minority. They tend to live in more rural areas than in urban areas. Urban areas have a higher concentration of what we would call white-collar, high-degree workers. But also in these areas, what we are seeing is that more and more of these jobs are being supported by technology, and they're good-paying jobs. As my colleague to the right probably knows from Georgetown, there was a report that came out called Good Jobs That Pay Without a BA, but I won't steal her thunder. But talk about, you can make very, very good jobs in this area. And so what we did in February of this year is we testified and gave a presentation. And if you have the slides, I'll just show 2 of those slides from that presentation, if you can bring them up, where we talked to the board and we testified and talked about blue-collar STEM skilled technical workforce. If you look at that, there are a number of jobs in this area that are not only in IT, but they're only in healthcare, they're in manufacturing. My background is also in defense. So for example, at the Norfolk Naval Yards right now, if you are a welder and you are certified, you can get a job because there is a shortage of welders. If, for example, many of you have solar rooftop panels, those are done by electricians. If you looked at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, they will tell you right now, in this area, Baltimore, Washington area, there's anywhere between a shortage of 2,000 to 6,000 jobs, electrician jobs, and across the country, about 100,000 nationwide. Now, today's electrician, not only does she or he have to be able to run Romex cable, but they have to be able to understand how to code and program certain systems. They have to understand circuit analysis. So your daddy's electrician is not today's electrician. When we gave this testimony and talked about this, what has happened is now the National Science Board is going forward. We're going forward with a listening session that's actually coming up in the next 2 days down in New Orleans to talk with the community colleges and work with the technical colleges and get the input from industry. My formal education is in chemistry. I have worked a lot with the chemical industry. If you go to places like Louisiana or Texas where there is a large chemical manufacturing industry, those jobs just need the requirement of being a U.S. citizen and the fact that you have skills, but you don't have to have a degree. And just yesterday, the state of Maryland, my home state, just announced the Department of Natural Resources is starting a new program called Live to Work Well, where WELL stands for water, the environment, land, and life skills. They are actually starting an apprentice-based program. All you have to do is have a high school degree, and they will teach you everything from boating skills to fishery skills to aquaculture to even environmental security, because these jobs are going unfilled. Finally, I will say that where we are seeing a shortage in this area, particularly in the male population, so for example, in our schools of engineering, we have a lot of people who have the book knowledge, but when they come out, for example, they don't know the difference between a Phillips head screwdriver and a regular head screwdriver. I tout this, and again, I'm just a kind of blue-collar, simple guy, is the encapsulation of the internal combustion engine. When I grew up, it was a rite of passage to know how to fix your own automobile, because if you didn't, your car couldn't go on the road, and you couldn't go to the football game or take someone out on a date. Nowadays, if you look at a car, you cannot get to the engine. The tools that are required for that can no longer, you can go down to Pep Boys and pick those tools up. I know I sound like an old curmudgeon, but for example, those tools are very specialized tools. And so, however, there are jobs in automobile mechanics that are a lot more specialized than they were 30 years ago. You have to use oscilloscopes, you have to use spectrum analyzers. And so then again, here again is an example of a skilled technical workforce jobs that are available. And so I'm looking forward, as I close here, in about 2 weeks, our quarterly meeting of the National Science Board will convene, and I believe at that meeting they will discuss and charge a formal task force in this area to go forward to be supportive of programs like the ATE and the programs you all support across the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. And then first, I'd like to thank both the NSF and AACC for inviting me to this discussion. I think it's really fortunate that I have to speak last, because every time I think I'm going to write something down and say something, I am, inspired by the conversations that started ahead of me. But I want to speak directly to the elderly curmudgeon to my left to say that I too remember my very first car and raising up the hood and when it didn't start, and fixing the battery pole, like just dusting it out and making sure that those battery poles were connected so that I could actually start the car. So I'm not quite as old and not nearly a curmudgeon, but I do remember some of those, and I also know the difference between a Phillips head and a regular screwdriver, because I would, go to work with my dad as an only child, and he actually got a female instead of a male, which he wanted, so I would go to work with him on several of his trips as a contractor in the 1980s. But I want to speak today a little bit about the context. So when we look at the discussion, hands-on, minds-on, pathways to highly skilled U.S. workforce, one of the things that I think of is the context and the history, because my role on stage is to tell us a little bit about how we got here. So the modern American economy requires workers to have at least some education beyond high school. Everybody knows that, that's why we're here. But matching particular college programs with careers has become much more complicated. Colleges now offer more than 2,000 fields of study, and job markets now include more than 1,900 occupations with distinctive skill requirements. The current lack of transparency between college and careers has fostered confusion in linking post-secondary credentials with distinctive career pathways. So one of our major concerns is how we can adequately link post-secondary credentials with what's required in the marketplace, and this is why the Center on Education and the Workforce spends so much time studying this, both on the national level and the state level, and sometimes even on the systems and particular systems, how those connections are made. I want to speak to a few of the reports that we've released that are really relevant to the conversation today. Good Jobs That Pay Without a BA, which we raised, was just released a couple weeks ago. And in that particular report, we highlight all of the good jobs that still exist in these United States where you don't require a BA. And our definition of good jobs is, frankly, wages. That you're going to make at least, by starting 35, on average 45, and most people even make $55,000 per year. If you think of what the annual salary is, the average salary is, it's a pretty good job for someone starting off without a BA. And many of these jobs also have transitional pathways where you can earn additional credentials, stackable certificates, test-based licenses, industry-based, market-recognized licenses and credentials that you can stack after time, so that by the time you end your career, you would have gained seniority. You could possibly exchange some of those for a higher credential in the marketplace in post-secondary education. And by the time you graduate from that particular college or go to that particular institution, then you can get a bump in your salary. So I encourage you to go to our website, cew.georgetown.edu, to look at that particular report. When I came here before, and in a few other meetings with AACC, I was asked to speak about another report we revealed on working learners. And what's interesting is that today, every single American who's in college must have some sort of work experience while in college to be able to connect adequately with the marketplace. Now, when we worked on this report, we had three generations of people working on this report. We had my director who'd graduated, I think, with his PhD before many of us were born. Then we had, some of those who were in the middle ages of the 70s and the 80s, and then we had some millennials working on the project, and we all, were equally contributing to this discussion. But the reason I say that, and certainly it's not with contempt, is just to point out that sometimes our perspectives are influenced by our own background. Because the people who had gained their PhDs in the 60s and the 70s, they saw working in college as a way to earn extra money. Working in college wasn't to survive or to pay for rent, or working in college was you're going to pay off your college. You worked in the summer to pay for your tuition for the next year. So all of us roll our eyes. It's like, if I worked in the summer, I can barely eat. Summer employment doesn't pay for tuition anymore, because tuition has increased so substantially over time that we're going to take out student loans. So the notion of paying for college today, for millennials today and our children today, is very different from a lot of people who are making these decisions about what we should be doing with our college. Every time I have a conversation and we talk about wages and earnings and what matters and highlighting which credentials matter and how we should stack these credentials in order of priority, we get a little bit of a rap on the knuckles, because we're reminded of what the true purpose of education is. And it certainly isn't to just create individuals for the workforce. I mean, education has all of these wonderful social dimensions to it that, that adds value to society above and beyond just getting a job that pays money. However, for many of us, if you fail to graduate on time, or if you fail to pay back that student loan, those student loans can't be written off anymore. Those student loans are a permanent part of your financial history. And I say to my nieces and nephews when they have this conversation, I say, do you know when Barack Obama paid off his student loan? Our former president paid off his student loan after he wrote one of his first books. So even our president is paying these student loans. So the student loans are part of the reason that we think about better connecting our education, our post-secondary credentials with workforce to make sure that people can survive, can have a good standard of living, and can take care of themselves afterwards. So close to 75% of the 21 million Americans currently enrolled in our nation's post-secondary institutions are working. And everybody works. Everybody works. Whether in a 2-year or in a 4-year, we found that, everyone is going to be working a significant amount of time. But the likelihood of working in field, of obtaining a paid internship directly in your field of study, has socioeconomic dimensions to it. So we care about that. Meaning that high-income students are much more likely to intern in a field while enrolled, while low-resource, low-income students work in the service sector and other jobs to pay their way. So there's a socioeconomic dimension to where people work while they're enrolled. And the outcomes also matter by socioeconomic status. About 50% of mature working learners work at least 40 hours per week. And our definition of mature working learners is over the age of 30, so between 30 and 54. And what's also different about the way our post-secondary institutions are set up today is that, everybody also goes to school. So everybody works and everybody goes back to school. Because this concept of lifelong learning implies that periodically all of us must go and re-up our credentials, re-up our certifications to make sure that our PMPs are still relevant, to make sure that our test-based credentials are still relevant. So I'd like to conclude my intro by saying equity still remains a concern. And when we spoke today about female participation in some of our manufacturing programs, there's still distinct differences in enrollment by gender in certain types of programs. If you look at engineering as a field across the board, in the 1980s, 1% of our students were enrolled as female engineers. And today, we have a number closer to about 18 to 20% of our students are women. So everyone looks as wow, we've gone from 1 to 20%, but I see, wow, we're only 20%. We should be closer to 50. And not all students want to be engineers. I'm certainly not advocating that every single person go into that type of field. But when there are clear relationships between what you take in college, what your first job is, and what you can potentially earn and will earn for the future, then we have to have these really hard decisions and hard conversations about, finding a better way to marry your interests and your values with what actually can create a career, a solid career pathway for you. We have another report called Women Can't Win. And it's a dismal title, and one of the reasons we're talking about women not winning is that we've been told as women all the years, you got to go to school, you got to get your education, you got to get your bachelor's degree, you got to get your associate's degree. And we've done that. At every single level of educational attainment, women now far exceed men. If you look at associate's degrees, there are more women graduating than men. Bachelor's degrees, PhDs, masters, certificates, certifications, more women than men. Yet the gender wage gap remains. And part of the reason for that is occupational segregation remains because of some of the decisions that people make for their careers. So we have to have these conversations about where we end up. I think it's interesting that when you showed the film, you showed a young woman in manufacturing. I'm very pleased by that. We sort of let people know that we don't necessarily have to follow in the footsteps of everyone else that was there before. You can pave your own pathway. You can create your own walk as long as the opportunities are there. And it's really heartening to see those opportunities created. And one last point about equity is racial and ethnic dimensions to these outcomes as well. Because we know that while we talk about exposure in high school, exposure to these types of programs and making sure that students are exposed to STEM, exposed to internships, to have an understanding of where they could potentially end up, mentorship and that sort of thing. At the end of the day, if you look at the composition of our enrollment by types of institutions, by types of programs, there's still a highly, racially charged element to that, where racial and ethnic minorities are underrepresented in the higher paying majors and in the higher paying types of programs. So my concern is that we have to mentor these students early on, and to let them know that even if you don't see someone looking like you in this particular program, it doesn't mean that you're not welcome there. We have to make sure that people are pursuing the types of majors that will earn them the jobs that can get you a job at manufacturing, that can get you on that shop floor so you can take care of your family in the future. Thank you.
All right. So lifelong learning, skills and competencies. I think you've got an entire audience of people that will stand up and say, yes, we're doing this. This is one of the things we're thinking about. We have industry people here. You've got educators from across everything from secondary all the way to 4-year. We all feel that this is a critical point. But if we can start with a couple of the questions, let me start with the first one. So, skilled technical jobs are attractive. Mm-hmm. In many cases, they're quite high paying. Yet we have business and industry that often say they have trouble finding that specific technical worker. What do you each see as the main obstacles that either impede or dissuade students and incumbent workers from pursuing the education in these areas and or pursuing these jobs? And I'd like to open that. Maybe we can start with our community college president, move to Vic,
sure,
and then Nicole.
Really, it comes down to the perception, and for years we have dealt with this, and we have slowly are changing the needle. But it starts right in our high schools and in our middle schools, and it starts with the guidance counselors. And one of the things we do during the summer and through our center is we bring in guidance counselors, and they go through a 2-week training, and they go through hands-on opportunity to really understand what advanced manufacturing is all about. They actually create something. They design it in the lab. They use the blueprints. They go out on the production floor. They make it hands-on, and they go back to the high school and the middle school, and they espouse manufacturing because they suddenly realize it's not this dirty, dark, and dank industry that my grandparents may have worked in, or the perception. We slowly, and I've watched it in Connecticut over the last 9 years, slowly starting to turn, and even the state did a We Make It Here campaign, and it shows the jet engines and the aerospace and really making it cool and attractive for the next generation, and for the decision makers. And those decision makers really are the guidance counselors that are guiding the students to these pathways and to these careers, and it's the parents at home. So if we don't really educate the public, educate the guidance counselors and that whole population, we're going to continue to have manufacturing as not an outlet or an avenue recommended for the next generation coming forward. So really it's something that we focus on daily, and both the underrepresented groups. We bus in 200 female students to do a STEM fair each year at our college to give them the hands-on. And I went in there and actually participated with some of the students, and they walked away from the virtual welder. It was a group of young ladies, and they said to me, I'm going to go into welding. I never knew I could use my design skills, and I could use that to fabricate things, and to, the more we get them introduced to the opportunities, the more they see the potential in these careers. And it's the educators and it's the parents that we have to educate as well too.
So it's us, the old curmudgeons, that are in some cases standing in the way. I mean, that is one way to look at it, because I actually had someone say to me not too long ago, the younger generation don't have that perception of dirty manufacturing. Mm-hmm. right? You know, as a matter of fact, they may have seen some of our virtual reality simulations. They may have even seen pictures of, I don't know, any one of the clean rooms, right? Or a robotics facility. How is a car put together these days? I always laugh and say, I think the floor is cleaner than my kitchen in those facilities. And so they don't have that perception. It's our generation that's giving them either the go or no go as far as what these areas are all about.
And to your point, that's what I hear all too often is our students, they say, I want to go into this, but mom and dad say they don't want me to go into manufacturing. And that's where the sticking point is, and we have to find a way to change that perception and advance it forward.
One way to change that is, and I agree totally with Jim, is you've got to get the high school counselors decoupled from the single path mentality for students, and that is that a college education is the only way to enter into the American dream. So many of the high school counselors understand the college game. They're very hooked into a lot of their local colleges. But for example, in the state of Maryland, when I talk to our Department of Labor, which has apprentice-based programs, they have very few high school counselors who are engaged or steering students in that direction. Particularly when it comes to underrepresented minorities, and being an old curmudgeon, that when I came up, the generation behind me, which were mostly, you know, my grandmother, my aunts, and those folks, those people were laborers, they were maids. They looked at me and said, no, you're going to be the one, you're going to get education. Okay, so they pushed education, and I'm particularly also in ethnic minorities, folks who had just come over in the past 100 years, you know, college education was to get out. The word blue collar was something that was looked down upon. You're right. However, this generation says, no, I want to be a welder, okay, or I want to be an electrician. And so we have to be able to let go, okay? Because, for example, even we are finding out as ourselves who are college educated and folks who are taking on accumulated debt that, for example, the return on investment is not the same return as we have seen before as these jobs open up. So I would agree that part of it is working with the high school counselors. And now you're starting to see that, particularly in some of the rural areas and some of the states where there's mineral extraction, places like Texas, Oklahoma. And I think you also are starting to see a lot of students who are looking these days and saying, now look, I saw my buddy 5 years ago, he got a college degree, or she's got a college degree, they're now working at Starbucks or Chipotle, and they've got $100,000 in debt.
Right.
Going into this apprentice-based learning, there is no downside debt that you accumulate. For example, what's offered here in the state of Maryland, and people are going forward with that.
That's great. Nicole?
So just a few points here. STEM jobs in this country account for about, if I were to quantify and try to estimate how many science, technology, engineering, math jobs there are, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only about 6 to 8% of our jobs are STEM jobs. In reality, however, STEM competencies, the types of competencies you learn while in a STEM type of training program, those competencies are required in over 40 to 50% of all our jobs. So what's been happening is that the nature of work has changed. And the nature of work has changed, and that's requiring more and more individuals to, I think, to be much more nimble in defining how they move through jobs and opportunities. Now, the reason I wanted to raise this is that we're asking, why is it that some opportunities go unfilled? How are we not getting the skilled labor force that we need to fill these types of jobs? And there's several reasons for it. One of them we talked about is just the process of socialization, where people sort of go where they're supposed to go, like ducks in a row, just follow, and that's something we have to break out of. But because of the changing nature of work, we have to also realize that millennials are different in their thinking and from baby boomers or Generation X or Generation Y. And the reason that they're different is that we have a different way of looking at work. The contingency workforce, where you offer work on a contingency basis, has grown substantially over the last 20 or 30 years. People no longer, at least the younger generation, no longer necessarily want to work a strict 9 to 5 where they feel that their entire life is subsumed by work on the floor. So we have to find some way of creating a new environment. I was listening to a TED Talk by Dan Pink recently, and a few other intellectuals that talk about this type of thing, and they were saying that because of the changing nature of work, we have to offer different types of incentives now to get people to work longer hours or to get them to work in this particular type of environment. Separate and apart from just saying, hey, I'm going to give you more money, I'm going to give you this amount and that amount. And one of the things that I found most fascinating in that discussion is that once we get to higher levels of intellectual stimulation, that we have to find other ways of getting people to work. The Forbes gives you the top 100 firms to work for every year. And the top, I guess, of the top 100 firms to work every year, half of them are in manufacturing and STEM types of occupations. And when you look at the characteristics of those types of firms, what makes them special is that they care about the workers. They care about the human capital. So they offer all of these additional fringe benefits that people care about, and this, this matters. So freedom to decide on exactly when your work schedule is, not necessarily a 9 to 5 if required. You can do that. Flexibility for moms, for working moms, so they can have their hours. Another corporation, SAS Corporation, which appeared time and time again, one of the reasons they were voted one of the best places to work and had a lot of women in top positions is that they also offered flexible hours and telecommuting times. So we have to move with the times. I think that part of the reason, that we see these jobs going unfilled is that you're just not offering enough incentives. And there are a couple, Capelli, time and time again says, if you raise the wages, people will come. And there's some truth to that. Our wages have been flat for the last 10 years. With very little movement over the last 10 years. We have been in an employer's market coming out of this great recession when millions of jobs were lost, when at one point we were losing 900 jobs a month. So we need to find ways of creating incentives to make sure that people get to those jobs. And yes, it's true that the skilled workforce, we're not encouraging enough of those students. But to your point, Doctor, yes, we have to encourage apprenticeship programs even in high school, bearing in mind that at the back of our head we're always concerned about tracking, about making sure that the same opportunities are opened up across the board and not to certain students.
So thinking about, in mind with that, of one of the things that is, I think, very unique about all of the entire community and technical college system in the United States is that it is the gateway for many of the underrepresented students. And that could be first generation to attend college. It can be African American. It can be Hispanic. You name it. We have an open door policy, right? Yet a lot of these technical programs, and this is true, I think, for almost all community and technical colleges, as the economy grows, our enrollment drops. So for a community college president, you're faced with a difficult decision, Jim, of what do you do when the enrollment drops? You know it's a great program. You know that you have industry partners out there that want to hire these students, but it's an expensive program, and you don't have the student numbers. How do you deal with something like that?
You look under every rock and behind every corner, I'll be honest with you. We actually, at Nuntech, had 18% growth in our enrollment last year. We sustained 17% of that growth this year from last year. And what it really is part of it is that marketing campaign I go back to. It's advertising. It's reaching the individuals. And there is a stigma attached with community colleges. And I was talking to a guidance counselor in the last 2 weeks, and she said to me, she said, I know a handful of students, they're not performing very well, and they need to go to the community college. And I looked and I said, no, that's not in the manufacturing programs. These are high tech. These are higher level math. You need to understand blueprint. So again, it's changing that perception. But to get to your your question, really it is advertising, and it's sending teams out for me into all of our school systems, touching parents, touching educators, touching students as often as we can to show that there are careers. And it's not just jobs, these are careers in these advanced technologies in manufacturing, like I said, with benefits and so forth. So it's a challenge, but it can be done, but it takes revenue and money. You have to spend money to make money. And just for an example, walking into a community college that I just took over, we had a $12,000 marketing budget for this last semester. I walked in immediately and said, increased it to $50,000, did billboards up and down the highways, did commercials and campaigns, and I sat down and the people said, well, we're in a fiscal crisis in the state of Connecticut. How can you spend more money on advertising? And I said, 10 full-time enrollment students pay for a $50,000 or $60,000 marketing campaign. If we can't run a $50,000 marketing campaign and enroll 10 new students, we're doing something gravely wrong. So again, it's perspective, it's putting things into context and making sure that we advertise. All too often, we take back and we withdraw and we stop and we cut funding and we cut things off. And I understand that's the challenge, but it comes down to funding, comes down to marketing for me, and we've proven it at Nantucket.
That's a great comment. Thank you. So I know that the lights are coming up a little bit. How about opening up the floor to questions from all of you? And
it's hard to see out there.
Yeah.
There.
Ellen's grabbing you a mic, John. Hold on one second.
Sorry, Karen. If I start over?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Thank you, so everyone can hear.
Working with a lot of inner city kids, one of the things that I find is one of the greatest barriers to college is coming from poverty. They start taking a look at the cost of higher education, and their families take a look at the cost of higher education, and they're terrified. And they feel, never seeing that kind of money that they know they're going to be in debt for, how can we expect these kids and their families to push themselves into going to an institution of higher education? Something has to be done in this country about the cost of education and providing free community college tuition to everyone. And that's the only way that we're going to break the racial barriers to education in this country.
I'd like to comment on that because when I'm not a member of the National Science Board, I'm the Vice President for Research at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, which is a historically black college and university. Any of you who know about Baltimore, it's one of those cities that faces a lot of crisis. Very few kids graduate there, less than 20%, sometimes 16% in terms of high school. We bring in a lot of kids to our university who could not have the option to go to other places to get affordable education. One of the ways that we look at to try to break that coding there is to first raise expectations of many of these kids. Many of these kids have been told that they're only going to operate at a certain social economic level, that they have a certain place. Unfortunately, sometimes their parents believe that. They convey that to their children. Particularly, for example, we've had sessions where we sat down where your kids come in and you say, my daughter's really interested in coding. What do I do? Well, the first thing you do is you don't tell them that young women don't code, okay? But unfortunately, those are the things you have to break. Because as what you're saying is, secondary thinking is thinking about what I'm going to do 10 years from now. Most people are operating at a primary level. I need to feed my family tomorrow. I need to put, that's right. I mean, they're at the bottom level of Maslow's curves. What we're trying to do is not only raise those expectations and make education affordable, but what we're also doing and working with the city is looking at parallel tracks where students can go get good jobs and eventually over time increase through either stackable certificates or getting AA's degrees to get in programs. So the program that I mentioned just earlier with the Department of Natural Resources is great for kids in Baltimore. Baltimore has a lot of parks. We have a lot of job opportunities. Once those kids get in the system, then they can say, okay, I'm up at this certain level. I need to enhance my my skill base, my knowledge base. I can go back, I can go to either a technical school, I can go back to a community college. Oh, by the way, the state of Maryland will pay for it. So that's what we have to do. But I think the most important thing is to show kids that there are expectations that they can reach, and that means seeing people that look like them in these certain skill paths, being able to open those opportunities. And I say for us, for example, as a four-year institution, partnering with the community colleges and the technical schools, and I will say four-year institutions haven't done that all that well in the past, but particularly in the city ecosystem, we have to do it because those are the workers that we have.
And John, to your point, taking down barriers to education, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And part of the advertising, but also I have found, and I've talked with hundreds of community college students, it is childcare, it is transportation, and it is affordability. And we have to address those things at the two-year community college level. I'm proud to say, as Nantucket Community College offers free childcare to all of our students. It offers free transportation statewide. Our entire system, our four-year universities now, $20 included in their tuition. They ride all the transportation trains. They ride all of the buses all over the state, not just to school. It can be to the food bank, can be to the doctor's office, could be to shopping on the weekend. We take those barriers down, we make our population being able to get around the state, move around, get to education, get free childcare, and of course affordability, keeping tuition down for our students. You're absolutely right. If we don't take those barriers down, we're going to see less attendance at the community colleges, especially as the economy.
I must admit, when you first started talking about working with inner city kids, I thought we were going to move towards a conversation about remediation, because that's really one of the challenges that we face. But the only thing more expensive than going to college is not going to college. And one of the things we have to, in the marketing campaign is let people know that. So you talk about low income and inner city, and I can give you some statistics. Low income students are much more risk averse when it comes to taking out loans. The smallest loan, so we looked at NIPSAS data, and the smallest section of loans, because they would give it the numbers to you in bite-sized chunks. The lower income students who come from low-income families are less likely to take out student loans. What this means is they put greater pressure on themselves while in college to keep on working longer hours, full-time jobs, sometimes with full-time curriculum, which increases their likelihood of non-completion. And when you don't complete, and you have a student loan, then that really is a recipe for disaster. So we have to, find some way of counseling early on, ahead of time, letting people know that here's how you go through the system. There's a question on the FAFSA form that asks you, what do you think your family contribution is going to be? And people have analyzed the results of this question by socioeconomic status and by race. And once you do that, you'll be amazed at the high percentage of people who say $0 from their family contribution and honestly believe that it's zero and don't get anything from the rest of their families. And there's a high, socioeconomic dimension to that. So really monitoring and mentoring and making sure ahead of time that people understand the college process, which can be very complex if you've never done this before, so that they can actually complete. Once you get that person to the door through that advertising, we have to make sure they complete, because the consequences of not completion is really devastating.
Absolutely. Before students take loans at our institutions, they have to go through fiscal literacy training. They have to go through conversations. I had a mother say to me 3 weeks ago, sitting and talking about a loan, because she was very conscious about taking a loan out. And when she learned that she could get a deferred loan, it was $50 a month, and the whole community college education is about $8,000 for 2 years, so they're not walking with $100,000 debt. But she looked at me and she said, right now you mean I don't have to pick up an evening waitressing job to help her pay for school? We can start paying for it when she graduates and so forth. But she said, no one ever explained that to me. No, we never understood that. So you're right. We have to explain to students their opportunities, how they can get funding, but also that they do, if you're going to take a loan, you're going to have to pay that back, and they have to truly understand that.
All right. I think we could keep going with this conversation, but we are out of time. So I would like to thank all the members of the panel. Vic has one last comment. Yes. Okay. All right.
If I can beg the pardon for the audience and my co-hosts here, is to just give a shameless plug. If you want to know more about this, there is going to be a conference that the state of Maryland is having, the first national blue-collar STEM conference. It's going to be November 6th at the B&O Railroad Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. And I believe if you look up Blue Collar STEM Conference, because they've just got an endowment for this conference, I believe all of the registrations will be comped. So I would look into that if you are in this area.
Thank you, Vic. And thank all of you. Let's give everybody a big hand.